The Department of Health and his team and our team have been formulating ways in which we can have the COVID cards that folks receive through the Department of Health also included as part of their mobile ID. We anticipate, after meeting with ITS last week, that we will be offering some sort of Mississippi wallet whereby not only will you have your driver's license and your COVID card and vaccine cards, but you can also have your hunting license and fishing license, and working with other state agencies to provide the information that they do in some form of mobile wallet. We look towards utilizing a new facility in Canton where we can maintain better quality control when questions are asked or phone calls come in. As it stands, those calls generally go directly to each troop district, and oftentimes the employees there are dealing with customers, and these phone calls go unanswered. By having a centralized call center, we'll be doing a better job of quality control when folks do call. We'll have a more knowledgeable staff, and we will also be moving towards a centralized print. One of the things that I've learned over the last year is that we are one of 3 states that still issue driver's licenses at each of our driver stations. Most states have gone to a centralized print where the IDs are mailed out to all customers, not just those that are renewing online. And again, I'd like to thank our staff, thank Deputy Commissioner Davis, thank the leadership in the House and Senate, and also the governor for the opportunity to tackle this issue and work with me as we continue to improve the services that we are providing to the citizens of the state of Mississippi. Be glad to answer any questions.
Commissioner,
Yes.
what is the status of the Department of Public Safety or the driver's license bureaus doing road tests for new drivers, not for commercial, but for just the regular driver's license?
That was part of the bill that was passed that eliminated the requirement that a road test be done. One of the things when we were looking at, obviously, the delays that we were having at driver service stations, part of it was the number of customers that we were trying to serve. And part of that was doing the road test at the time. When I asked at the time what that road test consisted of, I was told that it consisted of driving around the building and parking. And so we were trying to figure out a way that created more accountability for these drivers, that they would be certified with more drive time. And the legislature approved basically an affidavit from a parent or guardian certifying that during the year that these young drivers have their learner's permit between the ages of 15 and 17, that they will certify that these drivers have spent 50 hours in the car with the parent or guardian observing the rules of the road. And we looked at the statistical data as it pertains to that, and so far we have not seen any great increase of wrecks or teen crashes or anything of that nature due to this change. The reality is learning to drive, in my mind, is something that is taught from parents and guardians and teachers, and that needs to be emphasized. And I don't know that what we called a road test was really a road test. It simply consisted of driving around the building and parking. And if we're going to do something in the future, I'd like to see us go back to doing it the right way and actually have it worked out better.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think we should have an extended drive period time then, as opposed to what you say around the building and park? Do you think it would be better if they did actually have to drive around with an instructor? And to make
One of the recommendations that came from PEER when they did their report in 2019 is that we consider utilizing some form of third-party tester or certification to do some sort of road test. In the future, I'd like to see us gravitate towards that, whether it's off-duty law enforcement officers or teachers that provide some sort of certification for young drivers, certifying that they've also done that road time with the teenage drivers. I think that would be a good direction to move in. I hope to look forward to working with our legislative leaders, getting something of that nature passed. Yes, sir.
Commissioner, we had talked about this, I guess, back in May, and we also spoke to Representative Busby about it. He had mentioned tentatively that you were looking at first or second quarter of next year for the mobile ID program. This news of it happening in November is certainly ahead of that schedule. Can you speak to what changed to make it to be able to hit that goal much earlier?
Well, number one, what we realized was going with a full-fledged wallet that we had hoped to do, similar to what Louisiana was doing, would require going through a whole new procurement process to offer those services. So in meetings with ITS, they emphasized that if you want to be able to offer all these services that you want, all that's included in the wallet, it will have to go through a new procurement process. If you're just talking about the mobile ID component and then the COVID vaccination card that could be included, they felt like they could work it out under the current contract that we have with our internet service provider for driver services. In that way, we wouldn't have to go through a whole new procurement to make it happen. So that actually allowed us to move this timetable up. And while it won't be all that I was hoping we could offer in the beginning, I'm confident that we will get there once we get through the procurement process sometime in the spring.
Commissioner Jindal, when it comes to the virtual ID, would that be an app that people would download onto their phones? And if so, would that be something that would be able to replace a physical ID when you're driving or purchasing restricted items?
That's in the statute. And so, yes, it would be another form of ID that could be utilized. One of the great features, I think, with the mobile ID, and it did take me a little while to wrap my head around exactly what it was, but from a law enforcement perspective, it will allow a law enforcement officer that's approaching a car to interact via Bluetooth with that phone so that they can know exactly who they're dealing with before they even get to the car. So, I mean, I think that's a great feature for law enforcement, and it would be able to be utilized for any lawful purpose that you could otherwise use a regular ID. We've reached out to the Department of Revenue and Chris Graham to try to institute efforts with the liquor stores across the country and other folks that have to accept form of IDs to understand that they'll be able to take that phone and allow themselves to use that as the ID instead of the physical ID. And now the physical ID will still be available to anybody. All of this is optional. You don't have to have a mobile ID. A lot of folks are going to want to keep their physical ID, and you know, we certainly will maintain that that form of ID for folks. Yes, sir.
Commissioner, I know this is not related to the driver services program, but being that DPS has such a wide berth, as you know, with so many state services offered, I wanted to ask you a crime lab question, just the status of having someone to replace Howell, who had been there for so many years. What's the status of that, and when could we expect to see some new direction and maybe a renewed focus on the crime lab in terms of the backlog?
We've interviewed all the candidates that applied for the position, and so we are in discussions on which person's going to actually get that job. We anticipate that there will be an announcement on that by the end of the year, certainly, hopefully sooner. That person will be in place. Yes, sir.
Is there any updates on the patrols in Capital City area, specifically in Jackson? Are they still patrolling? Are you having any results in that area where troopers were, I assume they still are, patrolling in the Capital City?
We still have troopers working the interstates in and around the city. Again, that was part of the legislation that was passed, dealing with that in this past session. We do have some pretty good statistics that have showed that there has been an impact on DUI and arrest. I would also say that the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics has an increased effort as far as its response, and there's been a number of drug arrests. I've got some of the stats that show that we've picked up a lot more methamphetamine, cocaine, marijuana, all within the Capital District. In addition, Capitol Police has tried to be more present. Their forces are limited. We're at 78. As part of our budget request, we requested to have 150 Capitol Police. We'll feel like that is where we need to be able to really make an impact on daily patrols within the Capital District and beef up our investigative duties within the district.
Commissioner, a question about that in the wake of that shooting that took place last night on Capitol Street, well within the Capitol Complex Improvement District. We've heard some social media chatter since then, wondering about whether or not there were adequate patrols downtown. I mean, obviously you guys are in a supplementary capacity, and that's a block away from JPD, so we're not, you know, but I just had to ask you in retrospect, something like that happening in a fairly busy part of downtown, especially with the fair going on, do you feel like there is adequate coverage in some parts of the improvement district for something like this, a drive-by shooting that took place over the course of several blocks to happen?
No, we've got to do a better job, and part of that is getting the buy-in from the legislature to increase the number of Capitol Police that we have so that we can do that job. And I'm confident with their support that we will get there. I can tell you earlier today I met with law enforcement officers throughout Hinds County and Jackson and trying to improve the way in which we communicate with each other so that we can be more responsive. That's right down the road from where the governor lives, and I don't know if he has any comments about it, but he knows. I know he's passionate about it, and I'm passionate about it, and it's something that I can assure you is going to be addressed.
Thank you for that question, and I think the commissioner's answer is exactly right. The amount of law enforcement downtown is not adequate. Capitol Complex Improvement District and the law enforcement associated with Capitol Police was, and I know this well because I was involved in the conversations from the beginning in the creation of the CCID. It's supposed to be a complementary force. The Jackson Police Department still has primary over downtown and all of the city of Jackson. We didn't create the CCID to take over the law enforcement. We created it so as to be a complementary force. And so we're going to have to continue to work. Obviously, there are a lot of good men and women that work at the JPD. There's just not enough of them. And I'm afraid if we are successful in convincing the legislature to double the size of the force at CCID and we get to 150 officers, the latest number I heard out of JPD was they had less than 200 officers for the entire force. And obviously that's not an adequate number. Yes, it's what occurred last night is something that needs to get, we got to get control of it, and it's going to take everyone focusing on not only having a greater law enforcement presence, but we need members of the community to be engaged and involved. And look, we've seen marches in downtown, protests in downtown of people from all walks of life marching together, saying this violence that is occurring is not reasonable. It's not rational, and so we're going to continue to work toward that. But we're going to do everything that we can to continue to expand the presence of law enforcement through the means that we as a state have. And I know that the Hinds County Sheriff's offices, they're often, Hinds County SO is often downtown as well. But as you mentioned earlier, this literally occurred less than 2 blocks from JPD headquarters. Yes, sir.
You extended an executive order regarding COVID for another 30 days. Could you speak to that? Do you think we're 30 days out from being done with this, or 30-day window at best?
Well, obviously, as we've said numerous times before, the extension of the emergency order gives us some additional tools, telemedicine being one of them. Dr. Dobbs' ability to manage from the health department's perspective is another one. Access to Mississippi National Guard is a third advantage. And then finally, while I don't think it's 100% necessary, it's certainly helpful that as long as we have these contracts in place for the external resources in our hospitals, it's helpful to have that emergency order online. The extension of it did not come with any additional restrictions, nor did it come with any additional mandates. It just gives us more tools in the toolbox to deal with this. I should point out, as you know, we reached a little over 3,600 cases per day over a 7-day average at our peak several months ago. Today we're down well below 1,000, close to 700 cases over a 7-day moving average, down approximately 80%. Total hospitalizations peaked at 1,667 at our peak. We're down below 350 today, and so you know that I don't know that you meant to word the question like this, but the question being, does this mean that it's going to be over? I'm not sure that COVID as a respiratory virus is ever going to be completely over. I don't know that going to zero is a likelihood in America or anywhere else around the globe. We'll have to see what happens. But we do have to work hard to not only protect lives but also protect livelihoods, and that's what we focused on. Yes, sir.
Governor, I just had a follow-up to
Sure.
the question about the situation that happened last night, the drive-by shooting. I live downtown. I have others, friends who live downtown. We heard the gunshots. I wanted to know what, if anything, you heard and your reaction to that taking place just a stone's throw from where you live.
Yes, I did hear the gunshots, and we are fortunate, I guess, in that we do have a significant security presence on the grounds, but it shouldn't require that. And so, anytime, I mean, look, we have dogs, and we walk our dogs outside. And so, fortunately, at the time that this occurred last night, we weren't outside, but there have been times in the past where we've heard gunshots when we were outside. And so, this crime that is occurring in the city of Jackson is a major issue for all of us, those of us who either choose or are living downtown. But the reality is, when you look around America, and you particularly look at the need for larger metropolitan areas to